You walk into a room and immediately feel the tension. Even though everyone is smiling, you notice the slight hesitation in someone's voice when they say they're okay. You catch micro expressions that flash across faces for less than a second, while others are having surface-level conversations. You're reading an entire novel of unspoken emotions. If this sounds like you might have what psychologists call a hyper-perceptive personality. And while it sounds like a superpower, it often feels more like a curse. Because seeing everything means carrying everything. Today we're going to explore 10 signs that your brain is wired to perceive reality at a different frequency than most people. And if you recognize yourself in these signs, you'll finally understand why the world has always felt so overwhelmingly loud. If you're ready to understand the mind beneath the silence, subscribe to the Rare Psyche. This is where hidden psychology comes to light. Imagine this. You arrive at a family gathering. Your aunt greets you with a bright smile and asks how you've been. But something feels off. Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. Her hug is half a second shorter than usual. Her voice has this thin quality to it, like she's stretching it over something heavy. Everyone else is chatting normally. But you can't shake this feeling. 20 minutes later, you find out she just got some bad news about her health. And you're not surprised. You already knew something was wrong. This is not magic. This is pattern recognition on overdrive. Your brain is constantly scanning for inconsistencies between what people say and what their body language reveals. Psychologists call this high perceptual sensitivity. Your nervous system has learned to pick up on microsignals that most brains filter out as irrelevant noise. Think about how a smoke detector works. It doesn't wait for flames. It responds to the tiniest particles in the air. Your perceptual system works the same way. While most people need obvious signs to notice something is wrong, you're detecting the invisible particles of discomfort, sadness, or tension before they become visible fires. But here's what makes this trait so exhausting. You can't turn it off. You walk into a coffee shop and immediately sense the barista is having a rough day. You sit in a meeting and feel the unspoken conflict between two coworkers. You visit a friend and know they're pretending to be happy. Your brain is always working, always analyzing, always reading between the lines. And the hardest part? Most people don't see what you see. So when you mention that something feels off, they look at you like you're imagining things. This creates a strange kind of loneliness. You're surrounded by people, but you're experiencing a completely different reality than they are. But reading rooms is just the surface. What happens when you don't just see emotions, you actually feel them in your own body? That's where the second sign becomes even more intense. Have you ever been around someone who's anxious and suddenly your chest feels tight? Or sat next to someone who's sad and felt this heaviness settle into your own body, even though nothing bad happened to you? This isn't empathy in the way most people understand it. This is somatic empathy. Your nervous system is literally mirroring the physiological states of people around you. There's a neurological basis for this. In your brain, there are cells called mirror neurons. These neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform that action. They're why you might wince when you see someone get hurt, or why you smile when you see a baby laughing. But in hyper-perceptive people, this mirroring system seems to be turned up much higher than average. You're not just recognizing emotions cognitively, you're experiencing them physically. When someone near you is stressed, your heart rate might increase. When someone is grieving, you might feel actual physical heaviness in your chest. Picture yourself sitting in a waiting room. A stranger across from you is bouncing their leg anxiously. Within minutes, you notice your own body tensing up. Your shoulders are tight. Your breathing has become shallow. You've absorbed their anxiety without a single word being exchanged. This is what psychologists call affective resonance. Your emotional system resonates with the emotions of others, like a tuning fork. And while this makes you incredibly attuned to people's needs, it also means you're constantly processing emotions that aren't even yours. The confusing part is that you might not always know which feelings belong to you and which ones you've picked up from someone else. You come home from work feeling inexplicably sad, and it takes you hours to realize you've been carrying your coworker's grief all day. This is why crowded places feel so draining. It's not just about noise or stimulation. You're literally absorbing the emotional frequency of everyone around you. Your body becomes a receiver for feelings that aren't yours to carry. And if absorbing emotions wasn't enough, there's something even more unusual about the way your mind processes information. You don't just notice what people say or do. You notice what they don't say, what they avoid, the silence between words. Most people notice what's present. You notice what's absent. Your friend tells you about their weekend, but they skip over Saturday night. Most people wouldn't catch that. You do. Someone tells a story about their childhood and never once mentions their father. Others hear the story. You hear the silence. This is called negative space perception. In art, negative space is the area around and between objects. Most people focus on the objects themselves. But artists know that the empty space is just as important as the filled space. Your mind works the same way with information and emotions. You're constantly noticing what people don't say, the compliment they didn't give, the question they avoided, the topic they quickly changed. These absences create a pattern, and your brain excels at detecting patterns, even when they're made of nothing. Here's a clear example. Your partner comes home and tells you about their day. They mention their meeting, their lunch, their commute, but they don't mention their coworker, the one they usually talk about every day. Most people wouldn't register this omission. You do. And 3 days later, it comes out that they had an argument with that coworker. This ability makes you an incredible detective of human behavior. You solve puzzles that other people don't even know exist. But it also means your mind never rests. You're always filling in blanks that others don't see as blank spaces. The challenge is that sometimes there's nothing meaningful in the absence. Sometimes people just forget to mention something. Sometimes the silence is just silence. But your brain has been trained to treat every gap as potentially significant. So you analyze things that don't need analyzing. You create narratives around normal forgetfulness. And when you bring up these observations, people often get defensive. They wonder why you're reading so much into nothing. But to you, it's not nothing. The absence of something expected is itself a piece of information. Now here's where it gets even more specific. While you're noticing what's missing, your system is also hypersensitive to what's changing. Even the smallest shifts trigger your internal alarm. Someone rearranges the furniture in your living room by 3 inches. Most people wouldn't notice. You walk in and immediately feel that something is off. Your coworker changes their email signature. Others don't see it. You spot it within seconds. This is called low threshold for novelty detection. Your brain has incredibly detailed maps of your environment, and it alerts you the moment something deviates from that map, no matter how small the deviation. In psychology, this relates to something called sensory processing sensitivity. Your nervous system has a lower threshold for detecting changes in your environment. While most brains filter out minor variations as irrelevant, your brain flags them as noteworthy. Think of it like this. Imagine a security system. Most security systems are set to ignore small movements like a leaf blowing across the yard. They only trigger when something significant happens. But your internal security system is set to maximum sensitivity. It notices the leaf. It notices the shadow. It notices everything. This shows up in relationships too. Your friend's texting pattern changes slightly. They used to respond in minutes. Now it takes hours. They used to use exclamation points. Now their messages feel flat. Most people would need weeks to notice this shift. You notice it in days. On one hand, this makes you highly attuned to changes in people's well-being. You're often the first to notice when someone is withdrawing or struggling. But on the other hand, it means your system is constantly on alert. You're always scanning for differences, deviations, anomalies. And here's the exhausting part. Not every change means something is wrong. Sometimes people are just tired. Sometimes the furniture gets moved because someone was vacuuming. But your nervous system doesn't distinguish between meaningful changes and random ones. It treats all novelty as potentially important. So you end up spending mental energy investigating things that turn out to be nothing. And over time, this constant vigilance is draining. Your brain never gets to coast on autopilot. It's always actively monitoring, always comparing current reality to expected reality. But the things your brain holds on to aren't just changes in the present. You also carry something most people naturally let go of. Emotional memories that refuse to fade. You remember the exact expression on your mother's face when you told her you were moving away. You remember how your friend's voice sounded when they mentioned their ex 3 years ago. You remember the way someone's energy shifted in the middle of a conversation last month. Most people remember facts and events. You remember emotional atmospheres. This is called episodic emotional memory. Your brain doesn't just store what happened. It stores how it felt, what the emotional texture of the moment was, what subtle shifts occurred beneath the surface of the conversation. In neuroscience, there's a part of your brain called the amygdala that processes emotions. In people with high perceptual sensitivity, the amygdala tends to be more active. This means emotional information gets encoded more deeply into memory. You don't just remember that someone was upset. You remember the specific quality of their upset, the way their shoulders curved inward, the particular tone their voice took on. Here's an example. You run into an old classmate. You remember that 5 years ago when you last saw them, they mentioned they were thinking about changing careers. You remember the uncertainty in their voice when they said it. You remember that they looked away when they talked about it. Most people wouldn't retain these details. You do. This makes you an incredibly thoughtful friend. You remember what matters to people. You remember their fears, their hopes, and their small moments of vulnerability. But it also means you carry a heavy archive of other people's pain. You remember every sad conversation, every moment of tension, every instance of hurt that you witnessed. And sometimes you remember emotional details that the other person has long forgotten. You bring up something from years ago and they look confused. To them, it was a forgettable moment. To you, it's still vivid because of the emotional weight it carried. This creates an interesting dynamic. Your relationships exist in deeper time. While others move on quickly from conflicts or difficult moments, you're still processing the emotional residue weeks or months later. Not because you're holding grudges, but because your brain naturally holds on to emotional information longer. And those memories you carry give you an unexpected advantage. They help you build internal maps of how people behave. Maps so detailed that you can tell when someone is lying without even trying. Someone tells you a story, and something feels off. You can't pinpoint exactly what it is, but your gut tells you the pieces don't fit together. Days later, you find out they were lying. This isn't about being suspicious or distrustful. This is about baseline deviation detection. Your brain unconsciously creates detailed behavioral baselines for people. You know how they normally speak, move, pause, make eye contact, and when they deviate from that baseline even slightly, your system flags it. Psychologists who study deception have found that lies create what's called cognitive load. When someone is lying, their brain is working harder. They have to construct a false narrative while suppressing the true one. This extra mental effort creates tiny behavioral leaks. A pause that's slightly too long. A phrase that sounds rehearsed. A gesture that doesn't match the words. Most people need training to catch these signals. For you, it happens automatically. Your pattern recognition system is so finely tuned that it picks up on inconsistencies without conscious effort. Imagine a coworker tells you they were sick yesterday, but something about the way they say it doesn't match how they usually talk about being sick. Their tone is off. Their details are too specific or too vague. Your conscious mind might not even register what's wrong, but your gut knows something doesn't add up. Later you find out they took a mental health day but didn't feel comfortable saying so. The problem with this ability is that it makes relationships complicated. You know when people are lying, but you can't always say anything. You catch your friend in a small lie and have to decide whether to call it out or let it go. You notice when someone is performing happiness rather than feeling it, but bringing it up might make them defensive. This puts you in a strange position. You see through facades that others accept at face value. And while this protects you from being deceived, it also means you rarely get to experience interactions as simple or straightforward. There's always a layer beneath the surface that you can't unseen. But seeing through lies is just one part of the challenge. There's another layer to this experience that makes everyday life feel like a marathon. Your system gets overloaded faster and harder than most. You go to a party. There's music playing, people talking, lights flashing. Within an hour, you're completely drained. Not just tired, but overwhelmed. Like your circuits are overloaded. Meanwhile, everyone else is still going strong. This is sensory and emotional overload. Your nervous system processes stimuli more deeply than the average person. What feels like background noise to others feels like front and center noise to you. There's a concept in psychology called differential susceptibility. It suggests that some people's nervous systems are more reactive to environmental input. They're more affected by both positive and negative experiences. Think of it like having the volume turned up on life. Beautiful moments feel more beautiful, but overwhelming moments feel unbearable. When you're in a stimulating environment, you're not just processing the literal sounds and sights. You're processing the emotional undertones of every conversation happening around you. You're picking up on the group dynamics. You're sensing the mood shifts. Your brain is working at full capacity just to manage all the input. Here's what this looks like in real life. You attend a work conference. By lunchtime, you need to find a quiet room to decompress. Not because you're antisocial, but because your system has hit its processing limit. You've absorbed too many voices, too many energies, too many subtle social cues. Most people can filter out irrelevant stimulation. Their brains automatically decide what's important and what can be ignored. Your brain doesn't have that filter, or it's much weaker. Everything comes in at high intensity. The fluorescent lights, the background conversations, the emotional states of everyone in the room. And this is why you need alone time more than others. It's not about being introverted in the social sense. It's about giving your nervous system a break from constant input. Silence isn't just pleasant for you. It's necessary. It's how your system resets. The frustrating part is that other people don't understand this need. They think you're being difficult or antisocial when you leave early or need breaks. But what they don't realize is that their comfortable level of stimulation is your overload threshold. And while you're managing all that input in the present, your mind is also doing something most people's brains don't do. It's running simulations of the future based on patterns you're seeing right now. You meet someone new, and within weeks, you can sense how the relationship will unfold. You start a new job and somehow know which dynamics will become problems months down the line. You watch two people interact and predict they'll end up in conflict. And 6 months later, they do. This is called intuitive pattern forecasting. Your brain has processed so many behavioral sequences that it can extrapolate future outcomes from current patterns. It's like your mind is running simulations based on past data. In cognitive science, this relates to something called implicit learning. You've observed thousands of social interactions throughout your life. Your brain has cataloged all those patterns unconsciously. So when you see familiar early-stage patterns, your brain automatically projects where they're likely to lead. Here's a tangible example. You notice your friend has started making small excuses to avoid their partner. They're staying late at work more often. Their tone when talking about their relationship has shifted from warm to neutral. Most people would need these signs to continue for months before seeing a problem. You recognize the pattern immediately because you've seen this sequence before. And sure enough, 3 months later, they announce they're separating. This ability makes you seem almost psychic to others. They're shocked when your predictions come true. But you're not predicting the future. You're reading the present so accurately that the future becomes obvious. The downside is that you sometimes see negative outcomes before they happen, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. You watch people head toward preventable disasters and feel helpless. You want to warn them, but how do you explain that you just know? They haven't seen the pattern yet. To them, everything seems fine, and sometimes your pattern recognition works against you. You see a familiar pattern and assume it will play out the same way it did before. But people and situations are complex. Sometimes the pattern breaks. Sometimes the outcome is different. And when you've already mentally prepared for one scenario, the unexpected outcome can be disorienting. This is why you might struggle with giving people second chances. Once you've seen someone reveal a particular pattern, it's hard to unsee it. Your brain has categorized them. And even if they change, you're still watching for the pattern to repeat. But there's another side to all this perception that people rarely talk about. The way certain environments drain you not because they're loud, but because they're empty in a specific way. You're at a social gathering. Someone asks you what you do for work. You answer. They nod politely and move on to the next person. This exchange happens 5 times in an hour. And by the end, you feel more drained than if you'd had one intense 2-hour conversation about something that mattered. This seems backwards to most people. They assume deep conversations are exhausting and small talk is easy. But for you, it's the opposite. Here's why. When you engage in surface-level conversation, you're suppressing your natural depth. You're holding back the observations you're making. You're noticing the person's body language, their energy, the things they're not saying. But you can't mention any of it, because that's not how small talk works. So you're running 2 tracks simultaneously. The shallow conversation you're having out loud and the deep observation happening silently in your mind. This split takes energy. A lot of energy. Deep conversations, on the other hand, let you operate at your natural frequency. You can talk about what you're actually perceiving. You can explore the layers beneath the surface. You can connect authentically instead of performing socially. Think about it like this. Imagine you're a musician who can hear every note in a complex symphony, but you're forced to sit through an hour of someone playing chopsticks on a piano. That's what shallow conversation feels like for a hyper-perceptive mind. You're capable of so much more complexity, but you have to dumb down your processing just to fit the social script. And the worst part is that others think you're being intense or too serious when you try to go deeper. They're comfortable with surface level. They don't understand why you need more substance. So you learn to play along, but it costs you energy every single time. This is why you might prefer one-on-one interactions over group settings. In groups, the conversation naturally stays light. There's no room for depth when you're managing multiple people's social expectations. But one-on-one, there's a chance to drop the performance and actually connect. And speaking of performance, there's one more sign that might be the heaviest of all. The way you carry other people's stories long after they've moved on. Someone tells you about something difficult they went through. They share their story, maybe even cry a little. Then they move on. They go about their day, their week, their life. But you're still carrying what they told you. Weeks later, you're thinking about their pain, feeling it in your chest, wondering if they're okay. This is called empathic residue. When someone shares their pain with you, it doesn't just pass through your awareness. It sticks. Your nervous system holds on to it the same way it would hold on to your own experiences. Most people can listen to someone's struggles and feel sympathy in the moment. But once the conversation ends, their system releases it. They care, but they don't carry it. You, on the other hand, absorb it. The emotional weight transfers from them to you, and it doesn't always transfer back. Picture this. A coworker mentions their parent is sick. They seem okay talking about it. They're coping. But you go home that night, and you can't stop thinking about it. You imagine what they must be feeling. You carry their worry as if it's your own. Days later, they've compartmentalized it and moved forward. You're still holding space for their pain. This happens because your empathy isn't just cognitive, it's somatic. You feel other people's experiences in your body. And your body doesn't distinguish between your pain and theirs. So when someone tells you something heavy, your nervous system responds as if it happened to you. This makes you an incredible friend and listener. People feel safe with you because you truly hold their emotions. You don't just hear them. You witness them at a cellular level. But the cost is that you become a storage unit for collective pain. And here's the confusing part. The person who shared their story might have already processed it and let it go. But you're still processing it for them. They've moved on. You haven't. And you can't explain to them that you're still carrying something they've already released. This is why you might feel emotionally heavy even when nothing bad is happening in your own life. You're carrying other people's stories, their grief, their stress, their unresolved emotions. And over time, this accumulation becomes its own kind of burden. The challenge is learning that you can care deeply without carrying endlessly. That witnessing someone's pain doesn't mean you have to hold it forever. But for a hyper-perceptive nervous system, this boundary doesn't come naturally. Your default setting is to absorb and retain. If you recognized yourself in most of these signs, you're likely among the small percentage of people with a hyper-perceptive personality. Your brain is wired to process reality at a resolution that most people never experience. And this is both a gift and a weight. On one hand, you understand people and situations with remarkable depth. You catch things others miss. You sense danger before it becomes obvious. You connect dots that seem invisible to everyone else. But on the other hand, you carry the exhaustion of seeing too much. You feel too much. You know too much. The world is louder for you. Relationships are more complex. Rest is harder to find because your mind doesn't stop analyzing even when you want it to. What's important to understand is that this isn't a flaw in your system. This is how your system works. Your nervous system was built for high perception. And while the modern world often feels overwhelming for people wired this way, that doesn't mean something is wrong with you. Throughout history, communities needed people like you. The ones who could sense danger before it arrived. The ones who could read subtle changes in the environment or the group the ones who remembered emotional details that held the community's history together. Your perceptual sensitivity served a purpose. The challenge now is learning to exist in a world that isn't designed for your level of perception, a world that moves fast, stays loud, and rewards surface-level interaction. A world where your depth is often misunderstood as overthinking, where your sensitivity is labeled as weakness. But here's what I want you to take away from this. Your hyper-perceptive mind isn't a curse, even though it often feels like one. It's a different operating system. And like any operating system, it has its strengths and its vulnerabilities. You will always see more than others. You will always feel more than others. You will always carry more than others. And that's not going to change. But understanding why you experience the world this way is the first step toward making peace with it. You're not broken. You're not too sensitive. You're not imagining things. You're perceiving things that are actually there, but invisible to most. And that perception, as heavy as it is, connects you to a truth about human experience that most people never access. The world needs people who see beneath the surface, who notice what's unspoken, who feel what others have learned to ignore. That's you. And even on the days when it feels like too much, remember that your depth is not a flaw. It's a feature. If this resonated with you, you're not alone in this experience. There are others who see the world the way you do. And this channel exists for you, for the ones who carry the weight of perception, for the ones who live beneath the surface. Subscribe to The Rare Psyche if you want to keep exploring the hidden psychology that most people avoid, because understanding yourself is the first step toward finding peace with who you are. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.